Good afternoon. We want to welcome you to the Wednesday, February 26th Board of Douglas County Commissioners meeting. We'll start with our consent agenda. Is there any item that a commissioner would like to pull off the consent agenda?
I would like to pull item 1.1 off about the noxious weed management plan.
Okay. And I'd like to pull item 1.3 off. We apologize that that didn't have a link or any documentation, and we'll look at that in a future week.
Get to that point, I'm going to need you to make a motion to do that.
Okay. Any item that a member of the public would like to pull off the consent agenda? Okay. Do I have a motion for items 1.1 and 1.4?
No.
1. Oh, I'm sorry, 1.2 and 1.4.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's deal with 1.1 first.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I reached out to Alan Hollinger, who's our noxious weed director, and CC'd Keith on that. I think that they've talked about this. But in looking at our some mandatory noxious weed management plan, I was just noticing that for every noxious weed, they specifically have to create a plan, and it always has objectives, priorities, method, treatment program. And under method, I saw that under the identify sensitive areas, 4 categories are listed: ornamental planting, high water tables, areas subject to high pedestrian traffic, and areas where there would be runoff. And I know in our county, we've been really thoughtful and kind of progressive about identifying specialty crop areas to be particularly careful when it comes to spraying herbicides that can drift and create crop damage. And so I asked Alan if he could look into if we might be allowed to add as a 5th category specialty crops as a sensitive area. And I got back from him that that would be fine to add as a number, or I guess as letter E, specialty crop. So I don't know if you have special wording you want on that, but that addition I think would cover a really important sector of the county for farmers who are trying to grow specialty crops. And then I guess that language would have to be reflected through other parts of the plan. So I don't know if we can pass the plan contingent on that language change, or if we let you change it and bring it back next week.
We can certainly bring it back. We're not under an extreme time crunch here, so
Okay.
we'll bring it back next week.
Okay. Thanks. I really appreciate Alan got back to me really quickly. It was a kind of a last-minute thought, so it was a really nice response.
Keith, do you have, and you might want to come up to the microphone, Keith, because we record our meetings. Do you have a preference? I mean, do we need to send it back? Do we need to come back another week? Or can we just add that to it in our motion? I don't want you to have to come back for adding that.
Well, I think it might be good to have it come back.
Okay.
Is it a handheld now? Yeah, let us revise the language and we'll bring it back. 'Cause I want to be sure y'all are comfortable with it. And like I said, we're under no time crunch right now, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
So do you want to make a motion to defer that?
Oh, I guess I would move that we defer the annual noxious weed plan for a change in the language and have it on the consent agenda next week.
Second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Item 1.3, I'm going to make a motion to defer this until we get some backup information on it publicly on the website.
Could I ask Captain Buckholz to come up so I can ask him a couple questions
Sure.
on this? Is that okay?
Yeah, and while he's coming up, I'll just apologize that I think the sheriff's office did everything they were supposed to do. We just had a problem with the agenda and did not get it properly attached, but we'll make sure we make that happen next week.
Great.
Hi, Captain. So do you know when you were planning to start this process? Or how pressing is this?
If it's going to wait another week, we can do that. That's not an issue.
Okay, sorry for the inconvenience.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so did I get a second on that motion?
Second.
There we go. Any other conversation on item 1.3? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? And that moves us to our regular agenda item. So Public Works is here with an update on the South Lawrence traffic way planning. Is that you, Keith, or are you going to defer? Or? All right, so we'll invite a representative from KDOT up to talk to us about the South Lawrence Trafficway planning.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Chris Norton with the Kansas Department of Transportation, Bureau of Road Design. Myself and Greg Weathered here with HNTB that I'll bring up shortly are here tonight to update you on the status of KDOT's Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement, what we refer to as the SEIS for the west leg of the SLT. And during that presentation and after, we'll be available to try and answer any questions. Greg, you want to come on up?
Okay. Well, thank you for allowing us to be here to give you an update on the South Lawrence Trafficway, SEIS. We have a lot of information to cover here. I'm going to go through it as quickly as I can, but we want to make sure and cover those things that are most important to you. So at any point, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask myself or Chris or anybody else here that has anything to offer about the SEIS. So previously, when we've been here to meet with you, I think you're aware of the fact, as Chris indicated, we're in the middle of an SEIS right now, which is an important part of the process, and really we're here. What it does, it reviews the findings of the original EIS for any additional or new environmental impacts that could be a result of new improvements or changes to the community. During this process, we'll be meeting with federal and state agencies, different points along the way. And this graphic here essentially shows you the touch points along the way. And when we were here last, we were just moving from initial alternatives into the reasonable alternatives. So right now, we are here. And you might recall that when we last met with you, we were looking at that time, the initial alternatives of moving into the reasonable alternatives. The initial alternatives, just a quick reminder, was the no action, which we're required by federal regulation to do a no action as a baseline compared to the others. We also had transportation system management and transportation demand management that was being considered as a standalone improvement, which essentially could be intersection improvements, grading, shoulder widening, or bus on shoulders, transit, anything that helps control the demand on the system. Also, we considered add capacity expressway, essentially just add 4 lanes to what's out there now, but not necessarily improve the intersections like at Wakarusa from an at-grade to an interchange. And then you see here the add capacity freeway and the add capacity tollway highway. And these were the 3 that moved forward into reasonable alternatives, which are the ones that we're evaluating right now. I might also just add before I move on that I want to make sure that you understand that the two of them that fell out, the TSM, TDM, I don't think I mentioned the multimodal. Even though they did not move forward as standalone, they could be incorporated into any one of these 2 here, in some form or fashion, but just not as a standalone alternative. Just for a frame of reference, as I move through this, because I'll refer to the west leg. So this just indicates the west leg being from I-70 over to US 59, and then the east leg being from US 59 over to 23rd Street that opened back in the fall of 2016. So the add capacity freeway alternative, essentially this alternative, just as a reminder, looked at adding capacity from I-70 over to US 59, initially as a 4-lane, with the ability to expand to a 6-lane in the future as traffic warrants. But that's what we're doing right now, is evaluating the traffic to confirm what the demand is and what the need is here in terms of the number of lanes. So adding additional capacity, but the other, I think, primary aspect of this that we want to point out is looking at access along the corridor, and specifically here at 27th Street to evaluate improvements here with the congestion and safety issues that currently exist out there, and what we might do in this area. Also looking at improvements to the interchange up here at K10, I-70, and Farmers Turnpike. So what that might look like in terms of adding capacity to the existing west leg. You see here, basically expand this to a 4-lane. So you'd take the 2-lane facility, expand this to 2 lanes in each direction. And what we're evaluating right now is with a grassed median, similar to what you see on the east leg. But what's important about this, I think, to understand as part of the SEIS, as we evaluate impacts and clear this corridor to get a record of decision in terms of the scope of the work that's going to move forward, it's set up such that it will allow for a 6-lane facility in the future, that the corridor is in place to accommodate that. And the next slide does illustrate what that might look like. So you have the 4 lanes I just discussed, adding the 5th and 6th to the inside, and then converting the median then to a barriered section with paved shoulders here. So being able to do that within the footprint that's established through the SEIS. Any questions about that before I move on to the, okay. With that, I'd like to move into a little bit of discussion about the tolled alternative and changes that have occurred since we last met with you. You may recall when we last met with you that what we had shared with you is that there really isn't that much difference between the toll-free alternative, 4-lane facility with a divided median, and the tolled alternative, because in the beginning, the assumptions that were being made is that the tolled alternative would toll all lanes. So therefore, there's really no separation between lanes in terms of who's paying, not paying. Everybody's paying in the tolled alternative. So the footprint essentially can be the same between the two. But since we last met with you, the legislation that was signed into law last May changed the rules that we were working with. And so that changed what we had to consider in terms of what this tolled section was going to look like. Essentially what the tolled legislation says is that all existing lanes cannot be tolled on any facility that's currently out there. So what that means is that the existing lanes that are out there right now, according to the legislation, cannot be tolled. So the only thing that we can toll, according to is anything that's new capacity, so new lanes. I think the other thing that's in the statutes that would allow, like if there's a new bridge that goes out there that currently doesn't exist, that would fall into the category as well. But essentially anything that's existing, even though we would make improvements to it, if it's existing, we cannot actually toll it. The tolls collected on SLT could only be used on SLT. And the other thing that's important about the legislation is that the communities have to ask KDOT to request tolling be evaluated further. And what that means is as part of the SEIS, we're looking at the practicality of the tolled alternative from an engineering perspective, impacts to the environment, as compared to the other reasonable alternatives. But in terms of looking anything related to feasibility, that is something that the communities would need to ask KDOT to look at it further. Okay. So, the one thing that, as we move forward looking at the tolled alternative based on this legislation is wanting to have flexibility in terms of what this section might look like and actually look at a range of tolled alternatives, more of a low end, high end, in terms of different ways that we could do this, what the section might look like, what the number of lanes might look like. So that's what we're in the process of doing right now, is evaluating a range of alternatives. And what I want to share with you this afternoon is 2 of those that we're currently looking at. Not that they're not all that we could look at or all that we are looking at, but at least gives you some sense of what this might look like. So here you see a section, one of the alternatives that we're looking at, that indicates one general purpose lane, which would be a toll-free lane on each bound on the outside, and then you have 2 express lanes in each direction on the inside. Now, this typical section shows, here a concrete barrier between the express lanes in each direction, but also a barrier that separates the general purpose from the express lanes. This barrier here, it could be a concrete barrier, it can be just a buffer, painted stripes. There's many different ways that you can do this, and considerations to take into account in terms of what this is safety, enforcement, in terms of people not cheating and going over. So those are some of the things that we have to evaluate in terms of these different tolled alternatives and which one makes sense to move forward with based on the analysis. But this is just one section that gives you some sense of what this could look like. So again, a free lane, 2 tolled lanes in each direction. Here is another potential alternative. And what this one shows you is at a lower end, and this could be more based on the fact that what capacity, what the demand is and what's needed, is that you'd still have one general purpose lane in each direction, but in this section you've just got one express lane in each direction here, with still a grassed median similar to the toll-free alternative. This being more of a buffer separated, where it could be anywhere from 4 to 5 feet, that is striped out, that just delineates the difference between express and general purpose. Again, this section would be set up to allow for future expansion to the middle as demand warrants, that you could add another lane in each direction here, at which time you could fill this in again with paved shoulder and barrier. I think one thing that's important to point out here is that, with the flexibility with this as it expands, not knowing what the traffic characteristics are at that time, that, now, like I said, you're looking at one toll-free, one tolled lane, but when you expand this as traffic would warrant in the future, it gives you the ability to provide 2 general purpose lanes here, if that makes sense, where they're toll-free, and have one express lane here, or you could have, similar to their section, still 1 GP and 2 express lanes here. And I think where that's important is as we start to talk about the east leg and what that section might look like, when it would be expanded to tolling as traffic would warrant in the future as well. And it's important also to point out the reason that we're considering tolling on the east leg as part of the SEIS is only to have went through the process through the SEIS and evaluated what those impacts might be, cost-wise, impacts to users, to people that live along the corridor, how it could divert traffic, say, onto the local streets, so that as part of the SEIS process, we've at least identified those impacts that in the future, as traffic warrants, that it's easier to move into a tolled lane that's been done part of this process where we've cleared the corridor. And we have to remember that the east leg and west leg do act as a system as it relates to South Lawrence Trafficway, which is one of the other reasons why we would want to consider tolling here as well, at least the impacts. This slide here just gives you some idea of what access might look like along the corridor. So let me step you through this so I can help you visualize what this means. So you've got the west leg all the way over to 59, the east leg over to 23rd Street. The green circles here indicate interchanges that either currently exist along the corridor, I-70, 6th Street, Bob Billings, Clinton Parkway, new interchange location like for Wakarusa, 59, Haskell, and 23rd Street. So this is just where people can get on and off the highway today. What these triangles represent is where a vehicle can either enter or exit the express lanes. So here at the beginning, being able to get in or out of the express lanes. Here between Haskell and 59, you can see here between 59 and Wakarusa, Clinton Parkway, Wakarusa, Clinton Parkway, Bob Billings, and then here between I-70 and 6th Street. These locations don't represent specifically where these could be. They're just representative, just to say this is where you could have access. We're looking at several, at least at this point, several different scenarios that provides access only from the express lane out to the general purpose lanes at the state highways. 59 at the beginning of 23rd, US 40, I-70, and another scenario where more access points to allow more opportunities to get to the local access. One of the functions of express lanes in some respect is to give priority to through traffic, for those who would be willing to pay and maybe coming through the corridor, let's say all the way from Kansas City to I-70, that they could get through here. But where that's important as it relates to anybody that wants to get local access, you have access to all the interchanges via the toll-free lane. And what that means is if you use the express lane and you may only have access points here, let's say here, here, and here, and you want to get to 6th Street, that just means that somewhere back here you're going to know you're going to have to get out of the express lane if you've been in it all the way here and want to get to 6th Street in this last little stretch of toll-free lane here. Some of the things that dictate where this access can be is how much spacing you have between the existing interchanges that are out there, because you need to have room for people to get onto the toll-free, into the express, and back out. So I think that's the distinction, that you can get to anywhere you want to go. If you're paying, you're going to have to make some strategic moves to get out at the right time to get to those places potentially ahead of where you're actually getting off. Any questions about that before I move on? Okay. East leg. Just really quickly on this, at some point in the future when this would demand, traffic might demand the 5th and 6th lanes, that there's a potential for tolling these. You've got the existing 4 out here. According to legislation, you can't toll those, so they would remain toll-free, and then add the 5th and the 6th here and fill in the median. So similarities between both the west and the east in terms of expanding to the middle and closing the middle off, and then this buffer here, either being barrier or paint stripe. I think one thing relative to the east leg that's important to note is that the room that's out there right now, based on what was cleared as part of the east leg, would not allow much more than 5 feet here right now without any additional impact to right-of-way and the wetlands. So those are things obviously that we are bearing in mind, that this section is intended not to create any more impact in that area than what's already out there. Okay, that takes us through the tolled alternatives. So I want to switch gears here and give you an update on where we're at with the north end. As you recall, when we met with you previously and then back in early 2016, this was one of the contributing factors for KDOT and FHWA that came to the agreement that we needed to move into a higher level of environmental documentation with the SEIS because of the concern that the community had about the access up here at this interchange based on the alternative that came out of the concept study. So KDOT took a step back and been taking a look at some additional alternatives here, including the ones that had already been considered. And so we'd like to give you an idea of what those look like right now. So just to set up here, here's I-70, K10 right here. US 40 doesn't show up real well here, but it's coming across like this. The existing interchange at K10 and I-70 and Farmers Turnpike, which is the folded diamond with the toll booths right here for those who pay cash and or go through with their K-tag, and then 6th Street down here. So alternative 1. And one thing that I'll set up with all three, this interchange here is very similar between all three of the alternatives. Just some modifications in the access, specifically between K10 and Farmers Turnpike. And then as more access is added, this interchange gets a little bit more complex in terms of the levels of ramps that are out there to be able to accommodate the movements without conflict. So alternative 1, essentially, you've got K10 here as it approaches I-70. And what you have here is a system-to-system interchange. The existing interchange would go away, so it accommodates north to east movement here. You've got north to west I-70 here. You've got east I-70 to south K10, and you've got west I-70 to south K10 here. So this interchange only accommodates people that are going between K10 and I-70. And it's essentially, it's a two-level interchange with these ramps going over I-70. The access to Farmers Turnpike has been relocated to a new interchange down here at Lecompton Road, a diamond interchange. Currently, this shows Farmers Turnpike being teed into Lecompton Road, and that's primarily based on the redistribution of traffic, acknowledging that there is a large number of trucks that use Farmers Turnpike, Lecompton Road right now. That's still part of the evaluation. But when you've taken all of this traffic that currently was from K10, I-70, and coming up here, essentially everybody is doing this number right here. When you've moved those folks that were doing that over to here, it makes this north-south movement more dominant now as people are exiting here to go north on Lecompton Road, acknowledging that there's still some that will do this right here. So the reason for the change in configuration. I think another thing that's important about all three of these is that recently KTA has started looking at converting the turnpike to what's called all electronic tolling. It's cashless, so there'll be no toll booths. There'll be gantries, which are just, think of the ORT plazas that are out there right now on I-70 with the gantries that go over. So basically the card readers will be up there to read K-tag. There'll be video cameras up there that would catch those that may not have K-tag, but also catches violators that are going through without K-tag to be read. So anyway, that changes the way these work in terms of no toll booths here, so you can just exit freely. So with this one also, because we've relocated this access from K10 over to Lecompton Road, this also includes looking at improvements to US 40 all the way into 6th Street, which would include shoulder widening, right-of-way grading, intersection improvements, to bring this up to what would be a 3R standard that KDOT has in their criteria. Alternative 2. Again, you've got the system-to-system interchange here that has all the saved movements between K10 I-70 that I mentioned earlier. The primary difference here, though, is adding access from Farmers Turnpike to K10. So essentially, it's like adding 2 ramps in the middle of this system-to-system so that people can get to and from Farmers Turnpike and K10 through this interchange. Because you've added this extra level of access, now this flyover here goes up to a 3rd level. So this interchange just got 25 feet taller to accommodate that. And that accommodates the concerns, some of the concerns we heard from the community up here in terms of being able to still have access from Farmers Turnpike to K10 without having to take either I-70 or using US 40. You still have the interchange down here because this would provide the interaction between Farmers Turnpike, 600 Road, and I-70. So if you want to get to and from I-70 from Farmers Turnpike, you do it right here. A little bit different configuration of the interchange with a folded diamond on the westbound side, but then a similar configuration of Farmers Turnpike here where it does this. Again, part of that is because you've still got this higher volume of traffic now that's coming from K10 up here and doing this, and the numbers indicated that this made more sense to keep that configuration. But you can see this has a greater impact on the adjacent property. So that's, with this one as well, there are no improvements considered to US 40 because you've got the same access you had before to K10 or to I-70 that in terms of apples to apples, improvements here not a prerequisite based on this alternative related to the SEIS. And then alternative 3, which is a variation of the initial alternative that was considered at K10 I-70 Farmers Turnpike with the concept study, which provides access to all movements here. So you can get anywhere you want to that you did before in terms of Farmers Turnpike K10 I-70. So again, you've got north to east, north to west. The west to south becomes a flyover now instead of the loop ramp. So this goes up another level yet, a 4th level, so you're another 25 feet up in the air, but then you've got the east to south here. The difference with this one now, and this one of the things that we can leverage because of the all electronic tolling and we don't need cash booths now to collect cash, we're able to eliminate the at-grade intersections here that were previously with the existing interchange at this location and here, and can put 2 loop ramps in here that now Farmers Turnpike traffic has free movements to and from K10 in all directions. You don't have to go through an intersection to do it. This also is consistent with some of the feedback we got from the focus groups that we held back in December, where there was concern about the at-grade intersections here. So this modified interchange that keeps all the access here is simpler in terms of signing it. It's safer because of the at-grade intersections that were removed. Wakarusa. This is another area that we wanted to just give you an update on in terms of what's being considered here as part of the SEIS. So this is just the existing condition out here. So you see K10, the Wakarusa 27th Street intersection, the youth sports complex, adult softball fields, Rotary, the nature preserves and nature area. The blue shading here represents the lighter blue, the 100-year floodplain, as well as the darker blue being the floodway. And floodways, we are not to put any fill in these, so it's critical, that we take that into account in terms of our improvements and the impact that we have to this area here. So what you see here is what is being considered currently in terms of access between K10 and Wakarusa, which is an extension of Wakarusa Drive over to a new interchange that's located in an area that takes advantage of existing KDOT right-of-way here. that minimizes impacts to the floodway back here. Some of the primary reasons that the interchange was identified here as part of the concept study was because of just some of the engineering factors here that was creating impacts to the apartment complex, potentially to the Rotary, Arboretum, West Branch Yankee Tank, the youth sports complex. So this is what proceeded from the concept study, and we moved forward within the SEIS. Another thing that's in consideration based on feedback that has been received from the county is based on the long-range plan that Wakarusa is shown as a north-south arterial across the Wakarusa River down to County Road 458 with the development that is occurring down here and will continue to occur to make that more the predominant movement, and then let's make this a connection over to here. So what these dash lines represent is a consideration and evaluating this and the impacts of this in terms of not only clearing this, you know, in terms of the environmental footprint, but just understanding traffic operations, safety, and how that works. Okay, I mentioned the focus groups. We met with 7 different focus groups back in November, December. That was one in Shawnee County, 4 in Douglas County, 1 in Johnson County. So we touched residents, obviously, from the KC metro area, Topeka, and then here in Lawrence and Douglas County. We also had one focus group that was comprised of individuals from our advisory group that wanted to participate in the focus groups. So you can see we had 62 residents participate from 17 different zip codes, Lawrence, Olathe, Topeka I mentioned. We presented the same North End alternatives that you just saw. The overall support from the focus groups was for Alternative 3, which was the all access at the current location. We presented the same information on the tolled alternative in the different typical sections. One thing to point out here is that initially the support for the tolled alternative was around 33% until we got into more of the details where, because of the legislation, that you have one free lane in each direction, so that you still have a free option with the express lanes in the middle, that the support from the focus groups at least went up to about 2/3. You know, that there was a greater support of a tolled alternative if that made sense because of the option to still have a free lane. And then we also discussed with them the different types of funding options that could be considered: gas, sales tax, obviously tolling, and I've got numbers here somewhere. Yes, sales tax, state gas tax, less than 40% supported it. Dedicated sales tax, less than 25%. Transportation improvement surcharge, that got more support, more than 50. I mentioned tolls and the change in support once they understood that there was a free option. Okay, so the process where we're at right now. So, you know, based on screening criteria and methodologies that have already been established, but that we do add maybe some additional engineering factors as we start to get into more detail. You know, that's something that we'll be doing in the near future in terms of screening these alternatives against each other. Obviously, funding considerations will come into play in terms of how they compare against each other. And then ultimately, pouring that all into a funnel to identify what the preferred alternative is that the team would recommend moving forward with. So next steps. We are here, obviously tonight. We're in the process now of meeting with the local governmental agencies over about the next 3 weeks. So a meeting with you this evening. We are scheduled to meet with Lecompton next Monday, and then the City of Lawrence on Tuesday, March the 17th. We are trying to get location nailed down for a public meeting. in April, May, but that has yet to be determined. So we'll be getting word out as soon as we know that to cover a lot of the information that you've seen here with the public at large. So that concludes our remarks in terms of where we're at. So at this point, Chris and myself or others would be willing to and ready to entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Greg. Any questions?
I have a quick question. The first alternative you showed included improvements to Highway 40.
So that's what the north end, yes.
Yeah, with the north end.
Whoops.
And I kind of perked up with that because we've had so many issues on that two-lane Highway 40 with no shoulders and a lot of, you know, it's a, at least in my years on the county commission, we've had a lot of concern about that, and I think I've reached out numerous times to see if that road could be improved by KDOT. And so I kind of perked up at the idea that we have an alternative that includes some real improvements to that highway. But it's not, Highway 40 doesn't, is not part of the picture on the third alternative, the one that was more supported by your focus groups. So why is, just for my sake, explain again why Highway 40 is not considered as part of the system on the...
With the other alternatives? Primarily because looking at, you know, the goals of this study, which was to evaluate the impacts of any improvements to K10 in expanding it to a 4-lane facility with accommodations for future 6, access improvements at all of the locations, but you know, specifically K10 I-70, there's improvements being made down at Clinton Parkway, Wakarusa. That with that being the goal in terms of the corridor here, with alternative 1, because the access between Farmers Turnpike and K10 has been relocated to here, that now takes away the current way that everybody gets to K10 this way. That not that there aren't other options to get there, because a person could actually drive 800 Road, they could go over to further east than here, but in terms of state facilities, I mean, US 40, you know, would be the most reasonable alternative to give somebody that used to do this to now take 600 Road to 40 and go over. So that's the primary reason why the alternatives includes here improvements to US 40, because it's tied to the fact that we modified the access here that they currently do. But when we go to alternative 3, whoops, did I go? Yeah, alternative 3, this alternative doesn't require of a driver to go somewhere else. So as it relates to what we're trying to accomplish with this study, and apples to apples, what does it, you know, cost, you know, to, and the impacts that are associated with this versus the other, to add the improvements here would be unfair, because you'd be adding improvements over here that really weren't required, because you could still do everything that you used to be able to do here. Now, that doesn't mean that there couldn't be an acknowledgement that improvements might want to be considered, but it would be standalone from this and not part of this study.
Yeah. I think we just don't ever want to lose that idea that improvements on that US 40 sure would be helpful, because it's just been a chronic area of complaint and sense of safety issues. But I get the distinction now. Thank you.
You said that tolling could only be used for the SLT. So once its improvements are paid for, does tolling go away?
I don't believe so. I don't think the legislature, but yes. No. And keep in mind, this is a managed lane though too. So one of the things that the tolls that are being collected not only, you know, could be used for, you know, towards construction, but it is also for operation and maintenance, which is ongoing all of the time.
Great.
What he said. Yeah. Hi, I'm Kelly Kultala, Kultala, Public Affairs Manager for District 1 and KDOT. And yeah, the legislation does not have a timeline or a date certain for those specific reasons to be able to maintain and take care of the trafficway. It will not be used for the general purpose lane. It's only used for the new lanes.
Great, thanks. And do you have any idea of how many people would use the express lane? I mean, does your data tell you that now, or we're way too early for that?
It will, but we're still in the process of developing that information.
Okay.
Yep, it will tell us though. The models that we use in terms of, based on, operations, willingness to pay, the psychological factors, how many are going to go over here? Would some just divert to another street as opposed to, I don't like where I'm at, but I don't want to pay, so I'm going to go somewhere else. So the model, helps us make those determinations, but it's too early we don't know yet for sure what that's going to look like.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We'll move on to item 2.2, which is
Public comment?
public comment. Thank you. Do you have any public comment on this item? See, I knew it. Now we'll move on to item 2.2, which is considering awarding a construction contract for project number 2019-31.
Yes, we opened bids for rehabilitation of the bridge that carries E1400 road over the Wakarusa River. Excuse me, that's the old Louisiana Street alignment. Opened bids on Thursday afternoon, so it was after the deadline where I could include those to you initially. They were added later, so hopefully you all have seen the bid tab. The low bidder was Wildcat Construction with a low bid of $306,350.95. We received 3 other bids besides that were all higher than that. The engineer's estimate was $287,638.50. So the low bid is higher than the engineer's estimate. By statute, we are still allowed to enter into a contract if it's within 10% of the engineer's estimate. The low bid is 6.5% higher, so we are able to do that. We are recommending contracting with Wildcat Construction. And if you have any questions about the project, I'll try to answer.
Any questions? Okay, this is a public item. Any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll come back up here. Conversations, motions.
Move to approve awarding a construction contract for project number 2019-31, Rehabilitation of Bridge Number 11.80N-14.00E. Oh, and I read the wrong one.
No, that was right.
That's it.
Okay. Is that right?
Yeah.
So was my
To
motion.
Wildcat
Oh,
Construction.
to Wildcat Construction.
Second?
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. That ends our agenda. Let's move on to appointments.
We had a fire district for Palmyra. So I would move that we appoint David Brown and Richard Anderson to Fire District Number 2, the Palmyra Fire District, for their second full 3-year terms.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We also had just today some upcoming appointments to think about. That would be Eric Payton and Luke Sinclair's position on the Metropolitan Planning. I don't know if we want to do those today or think about them a little bit. And then Shannon Oury on the Lawrence Douglas County Health Board. We just got those today.
I think we could, I'd be happy to move that we approve Shannon Oury's second term on the Health Board.
I'll go ahead and second that. All those in favor say aye.
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 Might like to talk to Luke and Aaron.
Yeah, I think I'd like to talk to Luke and Aaron a little bit. Any other appointments? Okay, at this time we have general public comment. If any member of the public would like to address the commission, we'll take those comments now. We do ask that you sign in on the sheet over here. Make sure you use that microphone and share with us your name and your address, please.
Okay, good evening.
Hi.
My name is Larry Wilson, and I worked for Douglas County a long time. I was there 34 years. And there's always been two things that has really kind of bothered me the whole time I've worked there and since then. Pretty easy things, a lot easier than this program, so I think are pretty easy. The first one I think is really easy, and I think is what I'd like for you to think about and discuss is roadside mowing. Years ago, I don't know how many years ago, quite a few years ago, it was the commission made a ruling that the way I understand it, we could only mow 1/3 of the county back every year. Okay, I think that is a poor plan. Now, do I think that we need to mow the whole county back every year? No, I don't think that's reasonable, and I don't think that's a normal expectations. What I would like to do, though, is I think you're kind of holding up the Public Works Department on times when they can. There's three big things about road mowing that you need to consider. Number one is time that you have to do it. Number two is manpower and equipment. And three is the weather. Okay, those three are all determining factors. Okay, what I would like to do is take that off and let them mow when they can, if they can, and when it's appropriate. So like a dry year, man, if you got time, mow like a banshee. You know, and when you have a wet year where you can't, then, you know, do what you can. Just mow what you can from the roadside. Now, when they first did it, probably seemed like a pretty good idea, but as the years go by, we're getting more and more behind. Behind, I mean, the brush is growing. So if in 3 years' time, one tree gets started, and then you come around to mow to the backside, well, that tree's too big to really mow off, so you go around it. So then now 3 more years, there's more trees growing up in a bigger area, and pretty soon you got a big old stretch of brush. And then you have to cut it if you're going to cut it, then you're going to have to cut it, you know, just basic manpower, chainsaws, and drag it up and chip it, which is extremely time consuming. And anytime you mow the roadsides, I mean, this seems like a lot, but I think it's kind of important to me. You'll hear, when I was working there, man, your phone would ring off the wall saying, wow, man, the road really looks good, it's mowed back. Versus when I go somewhere, even now, you know, they knew that I worked for the county. Some of them didn't know I retired. Got to retire a young guy, pretty good gig. So, but people say, hey, how come they ain't mowing the road? And I said, well, that's what the deal is. So that's bothered me enough that I would like you consider it and give the Public Works Department a little more reins to do a better job. Okay. The next thing is a little harder program, a little harder thing to discuss, take a little more time and a little more planning, is gravel roads. Douglas County gravel roads, we only have 34 miles of gravel roads that the county maintains. Okay. Some of those gravel roads over the years, we've treated the roads and shoot, I can't think of what it's called now, but we tilled in magnesium chloride to road stabilization. Okay, so we've got some roads already road stabilized, but we haven't, to me, finished the job and actually paved them. Okay, a couple things that there are downsides to that, to not let that happen, and money, of course, and time, of course. But one thing is to make, if you really get that road up to, total high grade snuff, then you have to have plenty of, there's a lot that goes into it. You have to have so much clear right of way for safety reasons. However, it's been my understanding through the years, you could get a little less version if you guys would put a speed limit on that road. Now, I'm not saying 25 miles an hour, but even if you get down to 45 miles an hour, I think it's a doable program. So, but to me, we've stabilized some roads, and we're just there. It's kind of like putting new siding on your house and then not painting it. You're almost there. You just need to finish it off. Where I would start out, now, do you think I want to start in front of my house? No. I think we need to start on places that makes more sense. Number one is from Store Road to 40 Highway. That's up there, and then Buheim Road, I called it, which is a little further east in the back. We've stabilized those. They're ready to go. One downside is when you're, as a county, we have to maintain those roads still with a motor grader because they're gravel. So we got to drive all the way up there and then blade 2 miles, and then I have to drive all the way back. Same way with snow duty. You have to do the same sort of thing. So to me, it makes more sense. Now, do I think we need to do an 8-mile stretch? No, I think and I don't think you can bite that off. Maybe you can do a 2-mile stretch. That'd be a pretty big bite. But to me, even if you do 1 mile, a lot of people say, well, that's kind of crazy, do 1 mile and still got 1 mile of gravel. Well, yeah, but at least you got 1 mile done, a little at a time. I think you can do it over time and make a big improvement. So that's all my 2 cents. Any questions for me? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
It's really nice to see you. Last time I saw you, you were flying away in a helicopter.
I know it.
That was amazing.
Yeah,
But
for you who don't know, my last day, my wife said, what would you like to do for your last day when you retire? And I said, well, I want to leave out on a big bang. And she said, well, what do you have in mind? And I said, well, first I said, well, let's get a limousine and have a bunch of KU girls in there. And she said, that won't be happening. So we rented a helicopter. And so I got it cleared, and it landed in the parking lot, and me and my wife got in and flew us away. It was pretty awesome.
That is awesome.
So, all right, well, thank you very much for your consideration, and hope something happens. All right, thank you.
Larry. Any other public comment? Okay, we'll close the general public comment. At this point, turn it over to Sarah for administrator items.
I wanted to note and to just say publicly to the first item, Douglas County is going to participate in the statewide tornado drill next week, March 3rd at 10 a.m. So we haven't participated in this in the past, and so I'm excited that we are participating, but that means we will stop processing motor vehicle transactions and clerk's office transactions to the best of our ability, as we can, to participate in the drill and follow our severe weather procedures. We've got signs posted so folks know as they're coming in. Hopefully they read them, that this might be happening. And we've sent a notification to all county employees, as well as links to our procedures related to all of our emergency preparedness materials and what the process will be in place for those efforts. So just be aware if you're headed to the courthouse on the 3rd. And with that, we just have the updated legislative update is attached and some information from Watkins as well. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Sarah. Commissioner items? No? Calendars? Anything?
Either of you going to the Baldwin Chamber banquet tomorrow night? Nope. Okay.
I don't think I have anything. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. There's nothing else. We are adjourned.